All right, welcome everybody. Today we are going to have a conversation with Zane Harris. He is a gentleman that designed these beautiful glasses that are produced from Riedel, and he's going to talk to us about how he made them and specifically how they can be used to make more beautiful cocktails. This is part of it's a segment of a series on how to make your cocktails beautiful and Instagrammable. If you have stumbled into this video and this is the first time you're seeing me, my name is Livio, and I have been helping restaurants, bars, and of course liquor brands for almost 30 years just do their jobs a little better and produce products that their customers like. But in this show here, we film this in my living room, and I help people like you make drinks that are just as good or even better than the ones you drink in your favorite bar. Let's get into this, shall we? So, just for everybody on listening to us right now, or anybody tuning in today, this is Master Your Glass, and of course, this is part of a series about Instagrammable cocktails. What on earth are Instagrammable cocktails? How do we make our cocktails Instagrammable but not make them fake? And we can't just put paint in a glass. And so today, I'm really honored to have on the show with me, Zane Harris. The funny thing about Zane is those who follow my show know that I have been using this glassware for a very long time. It's just, I love it. It's really, really cool. Not because I know Zane, because Zane and I are looking at each other for the first time today. I've never met Zane before. We had one conversation on the phone to set up this meeting, and then that's it. So I'm kind of starstruck right now because this person has put together something really amazing. And welcome, Zane.
Thank you. Wow. What an introduction. I appreciate it.
Of
I
course.
really do.
Of course. So just really quickly, where do you live right now? Give us a little update of where you live and what you do.
Currently in Brooklyn, New York. You'll probably hear horns and maybe some yelling behind me every once in a while. No matter how much I insulate this room, it never seems to keep the city out. But yeah, so right now, what I'm doing besides the freelance glassware design for Riedel is I'm the head of mixology here for the Diageo department at Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Think of it more like a in-house consultant. It's a position that I created about 4.5 years ago. And yeah, so I've been doing that for about 4.5 years now. It's been going really, really well. It's exciting. I get to help out small businesses for free for their, that was a big thing for me when I was doing private consulting is I hated having to charge small business owners my fee, my living fee, when there's all these giant brands like behind me here that could literally pay for my paycheck instead of small business owners. And so that's where that came from. And ultimately, that's where this glassware line that we're going to talk about today also came from.
That's awesome. What a great story. I help local businesses as well. We have very similar roles, I should say. And I'm 100% in agreement with you. It's really nice to help people out for free and give them some of the simplest information, yet that it makes such a big difference for them. So give me, going back a little bit before your current 4.5 year role, how long have you been in the industry and what did that look like prior?
22 years this year I will have been in the industry. Started when I was 16 at my parents' restaurant. The story is I'll abbreviate it because it can be long. I've told it before, and in my other classes when I'm full of there's Brooklyn.
There it is. There's Brooklyn.
I've told this before. I do some online seminars on this glassware, and usually those last 2 hours. I don't want this to last 2 hours. So
Right.
pretty much what it came down to is I was 16 years old. My grandfather lived with us. He was one of those really unique individuals that was desperately in love with his ex-wife, and she was desperately in love with him, but they couldn't live together.
Oh my goodness.
So he lived with us in Washington State, just outside of Seattle. And my grandmother, she lived in Portland, Oregon. And so my grandfather would go down there every weekend to go visit her. And being 16, like most young people, I didn't really know the wealth of knowledge and this extraordinary person that was living in our downstairs. And I didn't take advantage of it when he was alive, and he passed unexpectedly when I was 16. And so in a vain attempt to get to know him better, I started looking through his past and his history, and I found out that he was a bartender in San Francisco in the 1950s, early 1950s.
Wow.
And I found this really cool black and white picture of him behind the bar, and he looks a lot like I do, with the really high-waisted apron, with his friends having a blast. And I started flipping through his old cocktail books, which at the time I didn't know were incredibly valuable, being first edition Savoys, and like the Jones guide, for example, is another one. But I had all these books that he left to me, and all these photos. And so again, in a vain attempt to get to know him better, I started teaching myself how to bartend at my parents' 6-seat bar. But yeah, so one day Robert Hess, I don't know if you know Robert Hess.
I do know Robert. Really well.
Drink Boy fame. Yeah. He walked in my bar, and he's a pretty soft-spoken, gentle guy. And he looked at my back bar, and I was introducing myself, and he was looking at my cocktail list. And I was like, "So what can I get you to drink?" And all I remember his response was, "Who the hell are you?" I was removed. I didn't know that this whole cocktail culture thing was just starting. And he was one of the very first bloggers. For your viewers or your listeners that don't know, check out Drink Boy. He also has the Chanticleer Society. Really great knowledge, and from the perspective of the enthusiasts. And so from there, he introduced me to the Seattle bar scene, where I got to meet Murray Stenson of Zigzag Cafe and everybody else that was around. And I felt I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't have to make limoncello all by myself anymore. Right. So that was great. And then from there, it just kind of snowballed, and we started doing crazy things like large format ice before anybody else was. Sorry, everyone that has to deal with that now. Really sorry about that. But yeah, I kind of stumbled into this world back then, not knowing that there was people fighting this fight to get people away from high fructose corn syrup and artificial colors. I just thought that's how everyone bartended, because I was 16 when I started, and I was out in the suburbs. But
that's funny. I grew up in Italy, and it was the same thing. In Italy, lemon juice meant an actual lemon. And then when I moved here, I learned that there were other ways of doing it. But I moved here in 2000. And so I helped that happen because I knew no better. I didn't want to learn the other way. I just wanted to keep on doing it my way. And that way also was where everybody else was going anyway. So very similar backgrounds. That's awesome. And so just before, if there's anything that I miss out of this, I think the most important question to me is, how did you get involved in having passion for glassware, and specifically for this project, right? Like, you can love it, but how did you start loving it? And then not only that, get involved in doing it?
That's pretty simple. Owning my own bar, which the very first bar I owned was Rob Roy in Seattle with a new Apte. I think I was 23 or 24 when we opened up that spot. Still going strong, knock on wood. I'm no longer a part of it, but it's still going really, really well. But one of the things that we did was we would have to buy vintage glassware, mainly because the classic cocktails that we were making, they don't fit in glassware that's around these days. Usually the Chinese knockoff, something that was made probably or designed in the 70s or 80s and is still going strong now. Mm-hmm. And so we had to buy vintage, and that became very expensive. And of course, they're not dishwasher safe, so you would break a lot of them. And bars being bars, it's a pretty rough atmosphere for delicate crystal. So it was always in the back of my head that there's this gap in the market, and I was waiting for a company. Someone, please make us glassware. Someone just ask us, maybe just ask us what we need, because you could probably make a ton of money if you just make something that's durable and is the right sizes, and fits our ice, which we'll go into in a little bit. It would be pretty simple, but no one did, year after year after year. And so I would write notes down. I would find glassware that I loved. I would take pictures. I would make sketches, make measurements. It's not something that I ever thought I would get into. But when I started at the distributor at Southern, I realized that Southern is the distributor for Riedel glassware. And I always told myself, if I find myself in the room with a glassware maker, I'm going to swing for the fences. And so because I was doing this consulting, we were making all of these big beverage programs, I would dictate what glassware they ordered as well. And, you know, I can control juices, like you said, or house-made syrups, or what produce from what farmers we were buying, or what distilleries we were working with. But the one thing I could never control, glassware. I knew no one in glassware. None of us know anybody in glassware. They're ethereal companies that exist somewhere that's not the US, apparently.
Right.
And so we never had control over that. Then I found out about Riedel, and so I was placing a ton of it in these just by default, really. And so they took notice and they invited me to go to this 3-day long kind of intensive training that they put on, where George Riedel was there, and he's, I believe, 9th or 10th generation Riedel making glassware. Fascinating company, still family owned. Was that?
Yeah, very much. I've heard they're on their 11th generation. I'm not sure if George is the 11th or if there's already a
Max. Yeah, Max would be the 11th.
It's amazing.
So I was taking this class, and everything he was saying about wine glassware started really resonating. Glass shape, volume, delivery to the tongue was one thing too. And it resonated with me so much that I started writing all these notes down on these cocktail napkins. I'll never forget the red cocktail napkins to match their aesthetic. And I had my laptop with me, and I pulled up one of my 3D programs that I used for CAD for like designing bars and whatnot. And I started modeling a glass. And it was actually this little neat glass that we'll talk about in a little bit, which is one of my favorites and one of the ones that's missing the most from the industry, believe it or not.
I love it. I have it.
It's a fantastic glass. No one's copied me yet. I'm really surprised. But George, if you ever meet George, he's a very intimidating older Austrian gentleman, right? German Austrian. And there's about 80 people in the room taking this class from all over the place. And I didn't notice. I was listening to him talking, but I've got ADD, so I can, I'm multitasking like crazy. He took it as me not paying attention to him. So he came over and he slammed his hand on the desk that I was sitting at the table, made me jump. And he simply said, pay attention or get out of my room, is what he said to me in front of 80 people. Then I just turned my laptop screen towards him, and there was this glass rotating there, and he saw all of my notes. And I said, we need to talk at lunch. And he looked at me, took a beat, and looked me right in the eye, and he goes, I'll see you at lunch.
That's awesome.
Everybody else in the room, we didn't know this at the time. And George and I love telling this story now, because to me and him, it was kind of like love at first sight. To everyone else in that room, people were like, oh my God, they're going to go outside and fight in the parking lot
Duke it out
at lunchtime. And even up until before, COVID and all the shutdown came, I was still meeting people that was working at Riedel, and some of them were still in that room, and that rumor is still going around. They're like, I don't know. They like fought at lunchtime, and somehow Zane came out with a glassware line with him.
Yeah, how did that work out?
That's not really what happened. I pitched him at lunchtime. I got halfway through the pitch, and I was thinking about all of my industry friends and all of my bar owner friends, thinking, this is it. Like, we could, if I pitch well right now, the industry could finally get the glassware line that no one has made us for 20 plus years. And he stopped me halfway through. He put his hand on my shoulder and he goes, Zane. I go, I thought in my head, great. I did my best. I can go home, head high, couldn't have done better. And he goes, I love it. Get it off of napkins and put it into a real presentation. Do you think we can get this completely designed in the next 6 months? And I was like, oh my gosh. and the rest
I just designed one in 20 minutes while listening to you. 6 months sounds reasonable with your fast skill set there.
Yeah, it did take it took a year and a half because I told him the importance is that I am only one head, right? And I'm more of a conduit for the industry. And now, yeah, the copyright on the boxes does say my name, but really what it comes down to is I needed to ask and test this in the market, to ask the industry what they needed or what they didn't know that they needed that I could potentially fix, and it worked out well. Hour and a half or a year and a half, I mean, of testing, bringing prototypes to bars on busy nights and telling them to beat the crap out of it and try it out and tell me what they thought. And what came out the other end was, it started with me, but really this is the industry's glassware. There's a lot of feedback from all over the world, because I got to think about my bartenders overseas too. I can't just create glassware that's made for ounces, right? I got to make it for milliliters and make it work for everyone. So yeah.
So Zane, can you walk us through each one of your glasses and just show us all the bells and the whistles?
With pleasure. Like I said, the very, very first glass that I created for this line was the neat glass. Now, this looks beautiful, right? It's got the design on the bottom and it's got the design on the sides. But what most people don't know is that on these tumblers, where this design comes to a point, you can see it right there. That's actually the 2-ounce pour mark for all of these glasses.
Oh, very
so
cool.
it's a measurement as well. Now, the reason why the neat glass is so important is that when you're making a Manhattan or a martini or a Sazerac, a lot of people don't like it in stemmed glassware. And you can see on the rocks glass here, which you'd be forced to make these drinks in. Look how much lower the 2-ounce pour mark is.
Right.
See where the point is right there?
Right.
Right. So what people end up getting is a drink that looks like it's not full, right? You want it to come up to at least the 1/3 mark to feel like you got a full pour. Absolutely. Now, a Nick and Sazerac or a Manhattan or a martini comes up to about here with a 2-centimeter wash line. So it feels like a full drink. Also, if somebody's ordering a $30 scotch, you don't want to make them feel like they're getting gypped. You want to make them feel like they're getting their money's worth. So this was a very, very important glass to me because there's a bunch of these drinks that are designed to go neat that we just don't have a glass for until now. Now, we did talk about ice, which is pretty important to me, obviously, and to a lot of our listeners right now. And the thing is if you're using cold draft or Hoshizaki ice, we all know about the inverted pyramid that happens, the 1 ice cube on the bottom and the 2 on the top. And you got to try to poke it with your bar spoon to make sure that it falls down properly to, displace your drink to the right pour line. And that just slows you down, whether you're doing a home bar and you've got guests over, if you're in a restaurant or bar trying to speed up, it's a pain in the ass. And the reason for that, is that most glassware is designed cantilevered on the inside. It's because it's cheaper to do it that way. The reason why is that when it's in the process and melted glass, they put this plunger down into the mold, and it's much easier to pull the plunger back out if it's at an angle. If it's straight, there's too much drag. And so one of the things I told Riedel was we need to create straight sides because our ice are at 90-degree angles. And so we need to be able to fall perfectly in the glass. So we came up with a way to create a plunger that actually expands on the inside and then releases and pulls out. And so what you end up with is a rocks glass that's straight sided, because that's important. Because if you have an ice cube, like this little fake one I have right here, and you try to put it into a regular glass, usually it stops about here.
Yep,
and it doesn't displace the drink. Because you have to knock off the edges of your ice cube in order to get into the glass.
Right.
Well, I made it straight sided, so it falls all the way into the bottom of the glass without having to knock off the edges anymore.
That's
also, look where the ice stops on a 2x2, which is what everyone has molds for at home. Now you have nose clearance, right? To drink out of. It's not sticking out of the glass. That's really important to me.
And if you put a 3-ounce drink in there, it won't come out, right? You'll be right. The line will give
right at the ice.
Love it.
Right at the ice level, actually a little bit below it so people can see it. But by the time it gets to the guest, usually it's right, because of melted ice. Now that's important, but the other thing that's really important to a lot of the people who are listening, especially if you've ever run a bar program before, you'll know that one of the biggest breakages in glassware that happens is nesting of glassware, meaning those cantilevered glasses, they may fit inside of each other, but the temperature differences make it so they stick, right? Well, I didn't want to take away that functionality because we have a lot of lack of space here in New York, to put it nicely. So I needed to have some way to be able to store these glasses safely, but without breaking the glass. So this design on the bottom, which has a lot of function to it, looks beautiful. It was actually to take weight out of the bottom of the glass so it cooled down at the same temperature as the top part here. Otherwise, you get stress fractures. But it gave me the opportunity to make it like a cog. And so now they lock into each other, so you can stack them butt to butt, like with like. Usually this works with the rocks glass and the neat glass. So now you can still stack, but now they're not going to break each other. And also they're not going to slide around because it's like a gear. So it locks in there.
That's amazing.
Which is pretty cool to me.
Very clever.
Now, we also talked about the highball glass briefly, and I told you how most highball glasses are too big. Most highball glasses are running right around 15 ounces. Just gigantic. That's a pint glass. That means that when you're making a drink with 2 ounces of booze in it, you have to put in a ton of mixer just to fill up the glass. Right. You're trying to shoehorn a drink into a glass that isn't made for the drink that you're making. So instead, this is at 11 ounces, which is perfect. That means it's about 4.5 ounces of mixer, and it makes for a perfectly balanced drink without over diluting your drink. Also, the height is important. Cold draft, Toshizaki, and those spears that you can get molds for come up to this 2-centimeter wash line. So you don't get that errant ice cube that sticks out too far, or if you take it out, now it's too low. I hate that. I've always hated that. And so this glass is designed around, all of this glassware is designed around ice in some degree or another, or pre-diluted drinks, right? So like Manhattans after it's stirred, or a margarita after it's shaken. What is the volume of that drink with ice? How do I make a glass that's around that drink, as opposed to trying to shoehorn these drinks into this glassware that they don't care. Now, the fizz glass is 9 ounces, so much smaller. You can see the 2-ounce pour line is all the way up here, right? But also this is straight sided as well. Very difficult. This was very difficult to pull off because it's so long. And we all know this, who's ever made a Ramos Gin Fizz before, that push pop thing is very important. So straight sides is necessary. Most of the people that have a problem with what I like to call the muffin top, that happens, is because their glass is cantilever on the inside like this. So the energy goes up and out and down. This just goes straight up. Very important. That's
one of those things, going back to people getting frustrated and thinking they can't make drinks as good as the bar or the restaurant. Yeah. It's because they don't have these little tricks that you're handing them, which is really cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. The other thing that's really frustrating me was always mixing glasses, right? So my mixing glass, instead of these points being at 2 ounces, they're at 3 ounces. And if you've ever had to batch cocktails before, you'll know how important it is that everything is at 3 ounces to fit in your glassware after dilution. So this way, if you're pre-batching at home for an event or a party and you have people coming over, you can make a bunch of Manhattan variants or whatever it is, and know that you can pour out of that bottle to that mark, and it's going to be the perfect pour every single time without actually having to measure it. It also fits 2 drinks without any sort of overflow with ice, which is also important. You want to make multiple drinks at the same time. The other thing is that your julep strainer locks in. This looks round, but it's actually not round. It's actually got a bit of a bump here, and it's a bit narrower in the middle. So that way ice can't sneak out around the corners of your Hawthorne strainers, which we all know we hate that when we're pouring drinks in a drink and an ice cube comes out. And you got to fish it out with your bar spoon and try to look professional at the same time. Like, no, I swear I know what I'm doing. You should be paying me $17 for this drink.
Right, exactly.
How embarrassing. So I wanted to eliminate that. My favorite glass, I have to admit, would be this. It's also the most delicate glass, obviously, with that lip, but this is the sour glass. And this was probably the most thoughtful glass of the bunch. And that's saying a lot, because what I just told you seems to be pretty thoughtful.
Sounds like a lot of thinking went into the other ones too.
Yeah. But this one in particular, and you'll know what I mean, and you're gonna love this. This curve was really important. The reason for it is if I make a daiquiri, I want it to come to the 2-centimeter wash line to look like it's a full drink, but not overly full, right? Too low, you look like you don't know what you're doing. Too high, you look like you're sloppy and you're wasteful. So you want that just right. But from here to the very edge, I need it to be 1.5 ounces difference. And the reason for that is egg white, right? In bars, you always have to buy 1 glass for daiquiri style drinks or sour style drinks. And then for your traditional sours with egg white or aquafaba or whatever, you needed to buy a separate glass because it had a larger volume, right? Mm-hmm. With this glass, you buy 1 and it fits both perfectly. This curve was a pain in the butt. So then when I was thinking about that, I also thought about the diameter of the actual glass here. And the reason why that's important is that it's bigger than the bottom of the glass. If you ever had to dash bitters over the top of a drink and had it splatter all over the base of your glass, and then had to sit there and wipe it off in front of a guest or whoever's over your house, it makes you look like you're sloppy or your server is getting really mad at you. So making this wider than the base makes it so when you dash bitters over the top, it falls here and here, not on the actual base itself, which is super important.
It might be a similar case for grating nutmeg as well, sort of, right? Because you're going this way. Very
correct. So that outward curve to this glass is important because it delivers the drink to the tip of your tongue. And why that's important is that drinks in this usually have texture, either ice chips from your daiquiri or that nice velvety head from a whiskey sour. I want that to hit the tip of your tongue where it's the most sensitive. The tip of your tongue is like the tip of your finger. And so it's very tactile. I'm going to let this, I want to let Brooklyn pass behind me right there. The inverse of that is the Nick and Nora. Smaller capacity in this one, but that curve on the lip does the opposite of the sour glass. It delivers the drink to your mid palate where it's less sensitive. Now, where you always hear people say, I don't drink martinis because they're too strong. Well, it's because you're drinking out of a glass that delivers high proof alcohol to the very tip of your tongue and it blows out your palate. The delivery system for this forces you literally to tilt your head back instead of put your nose into the glass. So that's why this glass is super important. It's for stirred drinks only, high proof stirred drinks, shaken drinks that have citrus or cream or egg white in them. And so these are the 2 glasses that you need, and they're inversely opposite. They have different roles, completely different roles.
Right. So the Cosmo would go in the glass that's in your left hand, and the Manhattan would go in the glass that's in your right hand.
Correct. Yeah, and that's what I learned from the Riedels. They were talking about Amarone, which if you're familiar with it, being a good Italian that you are, know that it's a high proof wine. And so they're talking about how important it is to create a wine glass for the Amarone wine that doesn't hit the tip of your tongue, because you don't want to taste the alcohol first. You want to taste everything else, the raisination, everything else first. And you only get that if it gets delivered to your mid palate first. Otherwise, it makes the wine, in their opinion, undrinkable, which I'm not that snooty about it, but it does make these differences. And you're talking about, how do you show love? How do you show that you care? It's all these little things that add up over time. And the reason why you choose to use certain things or certain spirits or certain ingredients when you're cooking, it shows someone that you care about them enough, and it all adds up in the end. So it's all important for sure.
Awesome. What a great presentation.
That's great. So the, and I understand that Riedel is a wine glass company, or it's what they call themselves. Are they going to allow you to design your very own spritz wine glass or your very own Bellini champagne flute, or is that their department and Zane needs to stay out of that?
They have plenty of glassware for that. We can get into the technical stuff that we learned together that made these and their wine glasses durable enough for a bar setting. Because again, if I'm going to design something for the industry, it's got to be affordable, right? But it also has to stand up to drunk people, large ice, and also the hot and the cold over and over again from our boosted dishwashers and semi-drunk barbacks. It has to all stand up to all of that in order to be worth it for everyone. So are they going to allow me to? I mean, they always want my feedback, but they've got that covered, that side of it. And champagne flute, no way. Riedel hates champagne flutes with a passion. I'm surprised they don't have a champagne flute breaking holiday in their family. They hate them. They absolutely hate them. And I have to admit, I hate them too. And once we talk about the design of each one of these glasses, it'll become apparent why. And you know already why champagne flutes are just a nightmare to drink out of.
Oh yeah, to do everything.
Especially being Italian like me, we got these big honkers that get in the way. Yeah, not conducive for drinking out of glassware that is tight like that. Not at all.
That's awesome. Well, I have another question or two, but give us more about your glassware. Give us what, the rundown. Of course, what's going to be important for this segment is people are trying to make their cocktails more beautiful. I never thought a social media channel such as Instagram would influence the cocktail world so much, but it is. It's a revenue generator because, of course, if the drink looks good and people are going through their feed, they see a beautiful cocktail, they see it's at Zane's bar, they're going to run over to Zane's bar. That's the concept from a social media standpoint. But from a mixologist standpoint or from a bartender standpoint, we can't just work with pretty. We have to work with pretty as almost the last thing. We have to work with delicious, doable. Can you replicate it? Can you crank them out? Oh, and by the way, can they look good? So what are your thoughts on any of that, and how does your glassware fit in that realm?
First and foremost, it's a glass is a package in order to give your hard work as a mixologist the visual beauty that it deserves. I mean, you can make the best cocktail in the world and put it in a crappy glass with a poor wash line and that foggy ice, and it's no longer a good cocktail, even if it's perfectly balanced and has all the right sourced products and you use the best spirit. Doesn't matter. That's one of the reasons why I knew that my glassware had to be crystal, for example. The way that light refracts off of crystal is so much different than the way that it refracts off of glass. I mean, you can see when I did one of these, for example, you can see the rainbow effect that happens off of the glass there. Well, it's not glass, it's crystal. So for me, any garnish or any sort of presentation has to also be functional. It's the same way that I design the glassware. It looks beautiful, but it's also intensely functional. And so I'm not a big fan of those garnishes that make no sense. And there's a lot of trends on Instagram, and you can tell when somebody that is not a bartender makes a drink because they'll put, I don't know, like baby's breath or something in it, not knowing that alcohol, I mean, the way you make a tincture is you put something in alcohol and it sucks out everything that is inside of that herb or whatever. Same thing happens with flowers or stems or whatever. So knowing that most of these flowers that people aren't using are not edible, and some of them are actually poisonous. Baby's breath is one of them. And it's just not something that you want to have in your drink to begin with. It makes no sense other than visual. There's nothing to it. So for me, simplicity is the best. And I have a bunch of saved pictures, by the way, in my own Instagram, because I follow everyone that uses my glassware, or I try to. I have a lot of great examples of ones that have worked, ones that I love. I'm happy to share my screen with you if you want me to do that.
Let's do it. And by the way, if you don't mind, what is your Instagram?
It's easy. It's Zane Harris, and it's my profile picture is the one that has my Nick and Nora glass in it. So awesome. It's if you want to allow me to share, I'd be happy to show you some pictures of some stuff that works.
So now you're asking me for technical things.
Yeah, it's okay. We can edit this part out. It's no big deal.
And do you know what you just did to me? Let's see.
See that?
Oh yeah, very pretty.
Yeah. So, I mean, these drinks are gorgeous, but they stay simple. Right. For example, I know for a fact there's pear in this drink. So there's a pear in the garnish, right? This one, on the other hand, it's a gorgeous picture. Right. But this flower makes no sense other than visual for me. It would have been fine just with the lime because there's lime juice in it. Also, they're doing a sour in my Nick and Nora glass, which is not exactly what I want. But when you're coming down to Instagrammable drinks, you don't want garnishes that get in the way of people being able to drink your drink, right? You're setting an expectation for them, and you said it right when you're advertising for a company or for a bar or restaurant. So when people see this imagery, they expect it to be executed in the bar. And the last thing that you want is for them to get this drink and get poked in the eye by a piece of pine tree like this one, right? It's not, doesn't make much sense. Also, you'll notice here, using ice that's too big for the glass, where do you think your nose goes? How is this going to work?
Undrinkable,
right?
Completely undrinkable.
Undrinkable.
Right.
Undrinkable. But when you go down to other pictures, like let's say this one right here, beautiful dusted glass on the outside. That's a big thing going on right now. It's easy to do as well. But I'll blow this one up for you. See how it's dusted? I love that. I think it's gorgeous. And a really nice garnish that can be pre-made on the side. Obviously, there's going to be orange in this drink, and so there's orange in the garnish. Makes perfect sense to me. When you start getting kind of wacky with things and start getting in the way, this is another good example. I don't really know how to.
That's called top heavy to me.
Yeah, the proportions are off, right? And you, I don't know, you got to take that off in order to drink the drink. I don't like that. For me, aromatics are a big thing in drinks, and garnishes are a way to deliver aromatics. And so it seems like a no-brainer to me that you would want it to have as much aromatics as possible. I love this shot. This is gorgeous. Of my Nick and Nora glass with that rose petal on top. But simple. Keep it simple. Keep it elegant. You know, more is not better at all. Actually, less is better. So yeah, for me, garnishes and pictures, keep in your mind that quality of ice matters, whether or not somebody knows about clear ice versus not clear ice. It makes a big difference. When you're using garnishes like this, nutmeg over the top, looks really pretty, adds texture to your images, but also it's an aromatic. So when somebody's drinking out of this drink, this one's actually one of my photos that I took, and a dried orange, because there's orange in here. Makes perfect sense.
Super functional. Super functional. Love
well,
it.
While we're on the concept of dry garnishes, I highly recommend them. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. I highly recommend them. From a business standpoint, it reduces waste, but from an imagery standpoint, it's a lot more interesting because there's a lot more texture and color that you can pull from it. It's also translucent. So if you backlight it, there's a lot of colors that you can get through backlit dried garnishes that you can't get through fresh garnishes. So in my opinion, there you go. 4-man function right there. Beautiful garnish, works for photos a lot better than fresh, and it reduces waste.
That is money right there. That's money. I've always been I grew up, classically trained in Italy. And for the first 5, 6, 7 years of my career, carving radishes was part of what we had to do. It was just part of the training. And so I slowly had to be talked out of, well, the garnish needs to be pretty. So I've always been living in my dual personality, as most people who live in 2 different countries and learn 2 different ways of living have to live through. And I've been slowly like defending both sides because I see value to it. But I feel like the way you just recapped that functionality with beauty, with simplicity, with let's make sure we can make this happen was probably the best way I've ever heard it, because I also have very little sense of humor for those people who dismiss things they just don't know how to do, right? No, garnishes are stupid. Well, are they stupid because you don't know how to make them? Or are they stupid because they're stupid? Because if they're stupid because they're stupid, we can have a conversation. If they're stupid because you simply don't know how to make them and therefore you think the entire world should not do them anymore, I have a problem with that. Same thing with technical bartending, right? If you have swagger, bring it. Does swagger have to happen? No. But to dismiss somebody that has it just because you don't is also not a thing, right? It's not. It's the lazy way out. But the way you just recapped that was man, right on point. I love it.
If you are running a business too, and you want to have some of these, tricked out garnishes, and it makes sense for the drink, and it's simplistic, and it's, all those things we talked about, form and function and beauty. But yet you don't want to sacrifice time behind the bar, because drinks per hour is a thing when we're talking about bars and restaurants. Keep in mind, making these garnishes that are pre-made before the shift, part of the prep, is completely doable. I come across a lot of business owners in my consulting that don't like to do a lot of what they call foo-foo stuff, not because they don't like it. They're like, yeah, it's beautiful, but I don't want my bartender taking 10 minutes to make a drink.
Right.
Completely understandable. So you're going to have to also think about execution. And if you want something, can you do it beforehand and in mass? Like if I have a drink that has a rim on a glass, I pre-rim a bunch of glasses before those shifts. So
Absolutely.
I don't want to have to do that when I'm really busy.
Absolutely. And it attracts people too because they see the glass already rimmed and they start asking, what is that? Oh, well, this is our, would you like to try? Absolutely. And the best way to explain that too is like the chef in the kitchen doesn't start mincing the garlic at noon when the tables walk in. Garlic is minced ahead of time because when guests come in, it's time to crank out the drinks.
I'm going to add one last thing before we probably move on, because garnishes are important to me, mainly because, I'm a big fan of something I call idiot-proof garnishes. Nothing hurts more than making a perfectly balanced daiquiri and having a lime wedge on the edge of it, and then watching the guest squeeze that lime into the daiquiri, take a sip and go, this is really tart.
Right.
Well, I mean, you salted your food before you tasted it. It's not, but I can't say that to the guest, right? So, that's where making sure you have garnishes that don't mess up the drink if someone actually makes them or uses them, that's important. The other thing that I really want to point out is the marketing aspect of garnishes. And we're talking about Instagram here. We're talking about photos. We're talking about marketing. Know that there are ways to create brands, like actual hot brands, to brand your orange peels or your lemon peels with your logo or your symbol of your business, or your account, your Instagram account, if you have a logo, and those are really effective because they don't seem cheesy, right? And then it doesn't look like you're branding it, pun intended. You're not making some sort of marketing scheme. It's more of a design aesthetic at that point. Also, using brands for the top of your ice cubes is really, really easy to find businesses locally that can make those for you. Usually they're woodworkers that make brands for wood. Just make sure they make them deeper on the CNC machine to sink into the ice. But those work really, really, really well, especially for Instagram. If you're going to be taking pictures of a drink and people are going to be sharing this, or if people are going to be taking pictures of the drink at your bar or restaurant, you want free marketing. If your logo is branded onto the peel or onto the top of the ice cube, that's free marketing for you.
And once you spend the money on that thing, it's forever. The stamp for the ice is forever as long as you treat it right. That's great. That's invaluable stuff, Zane. That's really, really, really good. What's next for you? What's in the docket? What's Zane gonna show us next?
So there's a lot of gaps in our market. One of them right now, because of COVID, has been really the lack of social media awareness. Not only content creation, but what do I do with that content once I have it, right? I hired a production team to make something for me. What do I do with it? So my wife and I and a business partner, we started a company called Gateweaver that is specifically a production company for this industry to help them come up with a plan and also create the material and the content that they need, be able to cater that to them, but also coach them through what's the most effective use for this content that I'm creating. Because I paid a ton of money for a photographer to take beautiful pictures. Now what? That was really important to us because it became glaringly obvious that there was so many businesses in our industry that were completely lacking in any sort of knowledge on the digital realm and how much it can impact business. Here in New York, we have bars and restaurants that attribute all of their success to their manicured social media accounts. And that's where their word of mouth comes from. And we would like to kind of share that with the world, because right now, as we know, all these businesses can use about as much help as they can get. So that was the meaning for that. So that's going really strong. We have good partners already, and we're creating really beautiful, unique content. This, you've seen ads for brands, right? You see the drink and you're like, I can tell that a bartender didn't make that drink.
Right, absolutely.
The wash line is all off. The ice is horrible. The garnish is limp or whatever,
Oh, no, absolutely. Well, that's great. We'll look forward to seeing more from that front from you, Zane. And I think you're an awesome dude. When we had our conversation last time, we nerded out about our bar units and a little project that I have going on as well. And you showed me your 2 sink unit, which I thought was brilliant. Um, and I'm Italian. So Italians are supposedly not supposed to be really good at math, but I did the math, and I think you're 38 years old. And so, if I'm right, and so you have an incredible career in front of you, and you probably haven't even scratched the surface on all the amazing other stuff you're going to bring to the bar world and to the home bar world. Because I like to teach people how to bring this stuff at home. It's a big part of what this channel is about, and the leap is so small, right? You're one intimidation away from having the cocktail just as good as your favorite bar. So I look forward to hopefully we'll get you back on this show for other stuff in the future. And
Love it. Absolutely.
With that, all I can say is thank you, and the floor is yours if you have any other message out there to give.
Not much. Just know that everything that you see at your favorite bars is more than doable at home. It's not rocket science. It's about knowing why certain things are done. It's about picking the right vessel, hopefully my glassware. It's very, very affordable. Like I said, it's important to me. During COVID, we've seen a big uptick in the home mixologist, especially the sales for wine glass versus spirit glasses. We're seeing that it's about 50-50 now. And the restaurants are opening back up. There's a bunch of people just like you who's listening to this that probably love cocktails, that learned a lot about cocktails at home, that are now drinking more of these cocktails at restaurants as well. So it's a wonderful world. It's a way to enjoy what you're consuming. It's like the slow drink movement, just like the slow food movement. It's about being thoughtful, and it's something that you can impart when you have guests over at home. That's a way to convey love. It just really is. It's showing them that you care, and that also comes down to the glassware that you choose. It's really important, and the garnish that you make for sure. But the drink is important. It's very important.
Absolutely. Awesome, man. Yeah, hospitality is about caring about little things too. It's not just pretty, beautiful, big smile, the greeting. All of that is good, but it's caring about the minute little details that really tells people you care. And that's what hospitality is all about. So, well, with that, my brother, I had a great time, and I thank you again for coming on the show. Big fan. And of course, there will be a link in this show description on how to order the Riedel glassware from Zane's line. And with that, I will talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
Cheers. Okay, well, that was a great video with Zane. He gave us a lot of information, gave me a lot of information. I'm lucky because, as you can see, part of this series, it's made of different people making different things. And of course, giving us their view from their lens. Now, what was amazing about what Zane said is everything that we have visited throughout this series was part of what he sees as valuable. So I don't have to do too much tucking and moving and trying to put a square peg in a round hole to make these cocktails look Instagrammable, because everybody seems to be somewhat on the same page. Everything seems to be workable. How difficult would it have been if he would have said, no, dehydrated garnishes are not the way to go, and we just visited a place that makes dehydrated garnishes, or the ice, same conversation. So I'm excited. Everything he taught us ties really wonderfully into what we're trying to do here. I will see you on our next episode where we are going to make these babies. Now, as usual, please give us a like if you found value in this show, and please do subscribe to Master Your Glass if you haven't already. And don't forget that bell, because it'll notify you when our next episode comes back. And that way I can come back and help you with some more expert instruction for everyday consumption.